Board members, if we can get you to take your seats, we'll get started. I want to welcome everyone to our board meeting today. Got quite a few new faces. I want to welcome the new board members that are ready to get sworn in here. So like the saying is you get sworn in before you get sworn at. So hopefully we get that taken care of. Want to welcome the family and friends that are here that are supportive on this occasion. The way we're going to take care of this is before we swear in, we want to recognize the new board members and those that were just recently elected. So I'm going to call you by name, and if you have a few words, not a lot of words, but a few words, we welcome that. And we'll get through the list, and at the end, hopefully, our Lieutenant Governor shows up. He's supposed to be here. It's been arranged, and then we will. He'll be up here up to the front here by the flag, most likely, and he will be taking care of the oath. And we'll just do one at a time. So, with that, representing District 1, we have board member Jenny Earl, and you're welcome to. Hopefully, they've helped you figure out how to turn that on. Okay, there we go.
So if it's red, well, I was not aware that we could give some kind of a comment at the first here, so I do apologize. I didn't know that was part of.
Well, nobody else is. Everyone's in the same boat.
Okay. Yes, but still, not really planning for that. But I am really excited to work with this group and to work with educators in the state of Utah and families. And so I look forward to the next 4 years, and I'm grateful. People have been very helpful so far, and that's been very welcoming. So thank you. I hadn't really prepared anything.
We're not after a lot of stuff.
Okay.
You've got family or whatever you want to recognize, and
I don't think he's made it yet. So
I'm kind of hoping that your daughter follows you around a little bit. So if we ever have like a big pause moment, we can get some music like we did the other day. So
I'll keep that in mind.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Earl. There we go. In District 2, we have Board Member Scott Hansen. So, do you want to take a minute?
Oh, just a brief minute. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm grateful for the chance to work on education in Utah. Excited to work with all of you and looking forward to learning a lot from you and working hard for the kids here in Utah. I do have my wife here with me today. Heidi's is back here in the back. Thank you.
Thank you. From District 3, Board Member Linda Hansen was reelected.
Hi, thank you. I'm excited to work with this board. It's always fun to have new people and to get to know new people. And I love this job. I really love this job. So I'm happy to be reelected. I've got my family here with me too. If you guys will raise your hands, I got my husband Ben, my son AJ, and my son Dan are all here to support me. So I'm really grateful for their support.
Okay. Thank you. From District 5, we have Board Member Laura Belknap was reelected.
Thank you. I'm just happy to be back and really happy to have my husband here today. Eric Belknap, raise your hand, babe. Wave. Thank you, honey. And I really appreciate the support that the board gives, but I also appreciate the staff here in this building, that when we reach out to them, they're open to it. But I really would like to thank the people who live in my district, who really, they worked hard to help me get here, and especially my own family and my neighbors. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Belknap. Next, we have from District 6, who is reelected, Vice Chair Brittany Cummins. So, okay.
Thank you. It is an honor to be back and to enjoy all of your company and to be a part of this conversation. I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate the time that each of you and all of us spend doing the work and being a part of what makes education amazing in Utah. And so I'm grateful that my husband is here today, and so grateful for his presence and his support. My family has been very supportive through the time. You have to wave to Laura.
Oh, there he is.
So thank you.
Okay, and from District 9, we have a new board member, Cindy Davis. There she is.
I'm just really eager to get going and get working hard. And one of the outgoing board members said that it has been almost all positive. So those are pretty good odds. I'm hoping that will continue on. And I have with me today, and you can raise your hands, my husband Ted, my son Eli, my daughter Celeste, another daughter who couldn't make it, my mom Cammie, and they are the rock stars of my life.
Okay. Thank you. And then I guess I'll introduce myself. Out of District 14, I was reelected, Mark Huntsman, here, and I'm looking forward to working with you. The past 4 years, it went by really quick, and I'm excited about the opportunities we have before us, but I'm also very grateful of the things that have been accomplished in the past, and hopefully we continue to have good momentum and participate in making good things happen for our students and our educators and our parents and our society here in this great state. A lot of wonderful things happening. I'm also really grateful for the staff and the support that is shown for the board. I'm not sure if we have very many legislators, but we've got some people from the governor's office. We appreciate their support also. My family wasn't able to attend. They're all busy working, and a lot of them are in the education community, and their priority is not me. So I'm okay with that. But they give me a lot of support. So I guess we'll get right into what the business at hand. We have our Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox here. We'll have you wherever you want, maybe come up here, maybe by the flag, so there's a photo op. And that will start with Board Member Jenny Earl, and then we'll go to Board Member Scott Hansen. We'll just follow the order as we are ready. Miss Lorraine handed out the oath that were taken for the office, and you're welcome. I have a spare up here to follow along in case your mind goes blank like mine does sometimes through all the excitement of being next to somebody really, really important. So let's start off with Board Member Jenny Earl. Okay, before we start, is these good angles for cameras in? Okay.
We'll talk. Is it okay for you? Loud so you can hear. You want us like this? Did the flags work? Is that okay? Okay. All right, we ready?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, go ahead and raise your
All
hand.
right.
I state your name.
I, Jenny Earl,
Having been elected to the State Board of Education,
having been elected to the State Board of Education,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge
and that I will discharge
the duties of my office with fidelity.
the duties of my office with fidelity. Thank you.
Okay.
Couldn't be here. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, Sky. Alex, congratulations. You still okay? All right. If you're right there. I state your name.
I, Scott L. Hansen,
Having been elected to the State Board of Education,
having been elected to the State Board of Education,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge
and that I will discharge
the duties of my office with fidelity.
the duties of my office with fidelity.
Congratulations.
Okay.
Where are we looking? Are we looking here?
That's a good idea, yeah.
You've done this before. I state your name,
I, Linda Hansen,
having been elected to the State Board of Education,
having been elected to the State Board of Education,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge
and that I will discharge
the duties of my office with fidelity.
the duties of my office with fidelity. Thank you.
Brittany, you're on deck.
Raise your right hand. I state your name,
I, Laura Belknap,
having been elected to the State Board of Education,
having been elected to the State Board of Education,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge
and I will discharge
the duties of my office with fidelity.
the
The duties of my office.
the duties of my office with fidelity.
Very good. You got it. We'll keep you. Brittany. Welcome back. Raise your right hand. I state your name,
I, Brittany Cummings,
having been elected to the State Board of Education,
having been elected to the State Board of Education,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge
and that I will discharge
the duties of my office with
the
fidelity.
duties of my office with fidelity. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, Cindy.
We got Cindy and then Mark. Right? Please raise your right hand. I state your name,
I, Cindy Davis,
having been elected to the State Board of Education,
having been elected to the State Board of Education,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge
and that I will discharge
the duties of my office with fidelity.
the duties of my office with fidelity.
It's a really important district you represent.
It's one of the best.
It is one of the best. I think it's the best. All right, please raise your right hand. I state your name,
I, Mark Huntsman,
having been elected to the State Board of Education,
having been elected to the State Board of Education,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I'll support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge
and that I will discharge
the duties of my office with fidelity.
the duties of my office with fidelity.
Congratulations, Mr. Chair.
You got it, Ryan?
I think
you say?
well, I'll say a quick word.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Okay.
Can I just jump
You
in
bet.
there?
Let me get, go like this. Sure, yeah.
So just on behalf of the governor, he and I talked earlier today. Thank you for what you're doing. We're so grateful to all of you. We know that this comes with much sacrifice to yourselves and to your family. It's never easy to put yourselves out on the ballot. We know what that's like a little bit. It's hard, and it puts you in a very vulnerable position. And all of you have made that choice and made that sacrifice. And I want to thank your families as well, because I know what that means to families. My wife and my children will attest that they know that public life is not easy, especially in today's world on social media. It's, as I've learned over the last 24 hours, it's easy to make everyone mad. It turns out I'm really good at that, and so are you. And that's part of public service, is making people upset, but also solving problems. And we love you for what you're doing. You're making a tremendous difference in the state. We're so proud of what's happening in our state right now. I know there's always that negativity, but if you look at the numbers and you look at what's happening out there, we have incredible teachers. We have an incredible public school system that is changing lives and making our children better and smarter, and our state a better place. So thank you for being a part of that, and good luck. You'll need it. So, let's get a picture, if we could, with everyone that was just sworn in.
What we're going to do is going to take a quick break, and then we can get a picture out here, maybe by the seal or here. But if you want pictures with your family real fast before we get to work, there's a good spot out here.
One with the lieutenant governor, everyone by the seal, and then he has an interview.
Yep. So, okay.
And then you can do individual ones, but just one with the lieutenant governor.
By the seal. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
So it'll be about 7-minute break. So for pictures and
Picture break. That would be good.
I did not get to know what time.
She's right here in the dark coat.
Saw her in here earlier. Board Member Ellis, I have to tell you, I'm out of sorts with you over there.
Well, I told Janet I was going to switch her when I walked in, just because I like sitting there. But I didn't want people to think I was like...
I should have switched everyone over, so it was all...
It's fine. Scott is sick. I just texted him.
Oh, I heard he was, yeah. Oh, I guess I shouldn't be too... That's on. I'm turning that off.
Well, someday, some of us should just go down and sit in Laura's place just to shake things up.
I wish all the seats because I like when we had the old desk, I like being able to see the audience better. Now it's like darting between she leans forward and I look back. It's like golf, yeah. It'd be like basketball walks out. Yes. Prevent Lisa from seeing her people. I don't ever have. Yeah, well, just that's why. Are you doing it? Brittany called me to ask me to do audits still. And then I said, so I'm guessing Tuesday, because I said last year we had all the old chairs. Yeah, Jenna, will you do the one? So he's going to double check. Are you going to do the? I can if you want me to. No, I think it'd be better because I was like, if I'm already doing audit and then I do this. Unless I hear otherwise. Plus, there were some things that I was I know, right? Oh, no, that's okay. I said to him, so I think he works his I know. Okay, so this is great. Yes, I it's
And I don't, here's the thing, I just want, I want something to make up.
Board members, I think we're really close to get started. I believe we are. If anyone's having any problems logging on, just kind of let Miss Lorraine know or raise your hand, and we'll make sure we get support coming that way. So now we've got that taken care of, the swearing in. That was a lot of fun. But I couldn't remember when I was sworn in. I can't remember the moment, but I'll remember this one, I hope. Seems like it was a long time ago. But hopefully you feel the weight and duties and responsibilities that now are yours. And so I looking forward to the good work that's going to move forward. So we're going to get into our meeting here. We're in our study session portion, and just as aware of, help you with your awareness here, we have a couple Jennies, and we have a couple Scotts, and we have a couple Hans, and I'll do my very, very best and be as respectful as I can in recognizing you, but it will probably be, yeah, turn them all toward, no, I'm just, I'll get them as this is moving forward. So what we have first on our study session is Open and Public Meeting Act Ethics Training, and we have our AAG Brian Quisenberry and then Michelle Buse. Did I get it right? I've got to make it's spelled where I always have to think on her last name, but Michelle Buse that's helping us. And anytime I invite board members, if there's somebody on the staff side that you're going, oh, I don't know their name, don't be shy. Just reintroduce yourself and say, I'm trying to remember your name. Because I believe staff will have your name down a lot sooner than you'll get theirs, right?
Oh, they're all memorized.
Okay. All right, so we're going to turn the time over now. Again, this is a study session. This is information. We're not taking any action here. So AAG Brian, you're up. Oh.
I'm going to go first.
Okay. Well, you guys just figure out how you're going to do it.
Okay.
All right.
We split the duties between the two of us so that you wouldn't have to listen to either one of us for the entire time. And so Brian asked that I go first and talk to you a few minutes about the ethics laws that apply to you as officers. They apply to us as employees as well. But because your bylaws are involved also, I'll just address it as it applies to you as officers. So, as public officials, there are ethics laws in place. There are an abundance of them, rules and regulations, policies, in addition to the laws, and all of them have the ultimate goal of promoting the public interest and strengthening the faith and confidence of the people in the integrity of their government, in the actions that you take as government officials. So today I'm going to talk to you about two specifically that apply to you as board members, and that's the Utah Public Officers and Employees Ethics Act and your board bylaws, the section in that talks about board member ethics. As board members, your job is to take government action, and you can call it a decision that you make, a contract that you approve, you can call it a denial of an action. Whatever you label it, you are the decision makers for us. In making decisions, you'll make decisions from simple ones like setting the time of a meeting to important decisions where you disperse millions of dollars. You'll make decisions that affect individuals regarding their professional competence. You'll make decisions approving methods of assuring accountability. However we label those decisions, you have a policy in place that provides some principles that should be considered when making decisions. And so I was just going to provide some of those guidelines that are in board policy. They encourage that decisions should be made based on the best interest of public education students and the public, without influence by those who seek special favors and without regard to personal gain. Decisions should represent the board ethically and avoid all appearance of impropriety. And decisions should be based on facts, free from partiality or prejudice, and unimpeded by conflicts of interest. And in defining what conflicts of interest are, Your board policy defines a conflict of interest as a situation in which a private or a personal interest interferes or has the appearance of interfering with the objective exercise of your official duties. Your bylaws give a little bit different definition of that, and they say that a conflict of interest is a business, family, monetary, or relationship concern that may cause a reasonable person to be unduly influenced or that creates the appearance of undue influence. So we're going to hit on 4 different areas that the law specifically addresses that can pose conflicts of interest for those who work in the public or those who serve as officers in the public. And those are the management of information, because you will have access to a lot of public information, but you'll have access to a lot of private, confidential, and protected information. The use of your position, accepting of gifts, and finally, defining potential conflicts of interest that must be disclosed under the law. With regard to information, it's pretty simple. The law just says that a public officer will not improperly disclose or use any controlled private or protected information that you gain by reason of your position, which will happen in your executive meetings. You cannot use that information to further substantially your own personal economic interest or to secure special privileges or exemptions for another person. In terms of your position as an elected official, the law prohibits elected officials from using or attempting to use their official position for those same purposes that the information prohibition was, to further substantially your own personal economic interest or to secure special privileges or exemptions for yourself or for another person. With regard to gift giving, in private business, there's a very acceptable practice of gift giving, and sometimes it's referred to in slang as greasing the wheels to create relationships and get things done in a quicker manner. But in the public arena, there are some specific provisions that prohibit those sorts of actions. And under Utah law, it's prohibited for a public officer to knowingly receive, accept, solicit, take. It gives you a list of ways that you could accept a gift for themselves or for another person that has a substantial value or economic benefit to the public officer in cases where a reasonable person would see that gift as being something that would influence the officer to depart from their faithful and impartial discharge of their duties. So it's all 3 of these that are the bottom bullets are judged from a reasonable person standard. If a reasonable person would see that gift as being a reward for public action that you officially took, or in an instance where the gift comes from someone or a business that has been, is now, or in the near future, will be subject to a decision of the board. Utah law does allow, so then we say, so can I not accept a birthday gift from someone? Can I not? How far does this go? So Utah law gives some specific exemptions to those provisions and says that in your position, you can accept an occasional non-pecuniary gift that is not exceeding the value of $50. You can accept publicly presented awards for your public service. You can accept bona fide loans made in the course of business. And you can accept political campaign contributions that are subject to the financial disclosure laws. You should know that even these gift provisions become more restricted if the gift giver is a vendor or the person is involved in the procurement process. So those become even slimmer. In terms of continuing that practice of gift giving, even gift giving to the agency is prohibited. It says that it is against the law for an individual officer or employee to require a donation to the agency in exchange for a favorable action that would be taken towards that individual, unless it's an amount that's required by a law. And in our case, we would have to set it on a state fee schedule. unless it is completely voluntary and those conditions are in writing. This law also applies to the offerer and prohibits a company or a business or an individual from offering the agency a donation in exchange for a favorable action. So it applies both to the giver and the receiver. The fourth thing that I identified that we were going to talk about is the personal interests and disclosing those personal conflicts of interest. Participating in decisions that involve a matter to which a public officer has a personal interest could be expanded to so many different things. Obviously, you have interest in public education or you would not have sacrificed so much in your life to be able to come and be here today. So not every personal interest that you have rises to the level of needing to recuse yourself from participation. But there are some specific situations that can happen that rise to the level under law or under your bylaws that you're required to disclose it. And so we're going to talk about two different disclosures that you're required to fill out. The first one we'll refer to as the conflict of interest disclosure, and that one's required under state Ethics Act law and your bylaws. Sorry. The second one that you're asked to fill out we'll refer to as the financial disclosure. So Lorraine has contacted you and let you know that you have these two different disclosures and they come to us under different laws. And although they may overlap and you may be putting some of the same things on both of them, they are two separate disclosures that you're required to give. I'm just going to give you a quick what has to be on the disclosure, when you have to do it, and how you have to submit it. In terms of the conflict of interest disclosure, the Ethics Act states that you must disclose any relationships that you have with a business entity that may do business with the board or may be regulated by the board, so subject to any decision that the board may make. If you will serve in a position as an officer, a director, an agent, an employee, or the language of the law says an owner of a substantial interest in that business. And then it defines what that means. An owner of a substantial interest means that there is an ownership by either yourself, your spouse, or a minor child of a 10% interest in the business. So those are things that the Ethics Act requires that you disclose. Your bylaws are a little more specific than that. And your bylaws require that you report in your disclosure any employment, ownership, or directorship that you may have with a public school district, with a charter school, or with an entity that receives state or federal education dollars. That includes acting as a consultant to any of those entities.
Michelle? Can I
Yes.
ask a question?
Yes.
Will you turn your mic on and then we can...
Oh. Yeah, okay. Plug in. Okay, there. So does that mean individually, or can you collectively say, are the bylaws that specific?
The bylaws are that specific. Each of these is listed separately in your bylaws.
Right, but I'm saying, do you list every single client you have, or do you list?
That actually, there is an interpretation of that is said if you have, as a business, you have 10 clients that you do provide a specific service or product for. You can list that product in one. You don't have to list every single client.
Okay, you can say I provide services to 10 clients, 10 businesses.
Yes.
25, whatever.
Yes.
Thank you.
That one specifically does describe that. So at any business or organization that does business with the board, you would need to disclose. The board bylaws also require you to disclose any memberships that you have in a school district or charter school committee or board. So if you're serving on a local board, you would need to disclose that in it, or a membership in a union, professional association, or lobbying group in the education arena. The last thing that you have to disclose or that could cause a conflict of interest is, under state law, you can't be an employee of the board and serve on the board. And so your bylaws directly address that and say if it becomes so tempting for you to work for the board that you decide to put in an application for a full-time job, you would need to recuse yourself from discussion about and appointing to that position. And that should you be offered that job, you would have to resign from your position as a board member or decline the employment. So that's the other conflict of interest that's in both law and your bylaws. As to when you're required to give this disclosure, the state law says that you're supposed to give it when you first become an officer. So at this point in time, you would need to do that. And you would also need to file an amendment to it any time that your position in the business changes significantly. So your management or ownership of it or your value of your interest in that business changes significantly. Your bylaws ask you to do it more frequently. Although it's only required to do it initially under the State Ethics Act, your bylaws require you to file this one annually. They require you to also declare it verbally in meetings where those issues are going to be considered that would be a conflict of interest. Your bylaws say if it's an open meeting, you would declare that conflict of interest, and then it would be the chair's responsibility to excuse you from consideration of that matter unless the issue can be waived. If it is a closed meeting, your bylaws say specifically that the member shall be excused from discussion of the issue. So at the current time, that's how your bylaws read regarding that. The way that you disclose it is it has to be a sworn statement. I think that if Lorraine hasn't left a copy of it at your table, she's going to give you a copy of that today, of the conflict of interest one. And if you could get that back to her as soon as possible at the latest next board meeting. It needs to be filed with the head of the agency, who is our board chair, and it has to be kept as a public record. Your bylaws ask you to please give it to the board secretary and she'll manage it for your board chair. And your bylaws also state that it will be posted on your board website. And so Lorraine uploads those and posts it to your individual page with the information about you. In terms of the financial disclosure, you were emailed a copy of this one, and it's required under a whole different section of the law, the election code. It requires that you disclose a pretty detailed accounting of your employment and business dealings, and also the employment and business dealings of your spouse or partner, and the way that it's worded is other household non-related adult members of your household. This one has to be also filed annually, and the statute actually gives a date that it has to be filed by. So when Lorraine says to you, I have to have this by January 10th, she's telling you that because the statute actually says it has to be filed by January the 10th. So she's not making up the deadline. It comes from the statute and says if that falls on a weekend, then it's the next business day. But if you can cooperate and help her with that. Yes?
Can I just make a statement?
Ms. Lorraine.
And just a little note on that. It isn't me that collects that. It's the Lieutenant Governor's office that sends that out to you. You send it back to them. But what they asked me to do is just send you nice little reminders, so I try to do that.
Thank you. The other thing this law says that if something occurs in a discussion in one of your board meetings where it comes to light that an issue that you did not see that you would possibly have had a conflict of interest with and hadn't put it on your financial disclosure, that you verbally declare it in that meeting. Your bylaws say the same thing. It's one of those overlapping things that say the same thing. So that one shouldn't be a difficult one. And as Lorraine said, this one is a form that is provided directly to us by the Lieutenant Governor's office. It's not one that we choose how it looks. We didn't choose the questions that they ask or the information that they request from you. That's all statutory, and the form is created by the Lieutenant Governor's office, and it's filed directly with the Lieutenant Governor's office. This one is a public record, and it remains a public record for the same number of years that you were elected to office. So for 4 years, it remains a public record, your disclosure that you make under the financial law. There are some violations in the code provisions. Some consequences for violations in the code provisions. For the Ethics Act and for the Financial Disclosure Act, it says that if you knowingly and intentionally violate it. So not, I forgot to put that down and then I verbally declare it, but a knowing and intentional violation can result in a removal from office. There are some criminal penalties that can be assessed depending on the value of the matter that was discussed or at issue in the violation. And in the financial disclosure, there are some civil penalties for a knowing and intentional violation of that. So not ending on that negative note, but ending on a positive note of how much we appreciate your willingness to take on the mantle of making all of these decisions and being the public face of education for us. We appreciate very much being your support staff and being here for you. I wanted to end with this statement out of your bylaws that kind of gives that reasoning behind requiring those disclosures and being upfront and transparent with the public, that as a board acting in the best interests of the school children of the state and not for personal gain, providing oversight governance to ensure that the public's business is transacted legally and efficiently, and making decisions to protect and safeguard the resources in the board's care. And so we surely appreciate being support for you in doing that. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
Okay, thank you. I'll turn it over to Brian.
Thank you. Okay, Brian.
I'm just learning.
Yeah, so let's see, I think it's
Oh, Board Member Belknap.
disconnect. I think you go to the A,
Oh, there it is. Okay.
and then you
Stop.
hit stop.
Okay.
And then I can,
Michelle, I have a question.
Okay.
And I'm thinking that this is on my honor type deal. What if it seems to be a conflict of interest and, for example, I don't say something and yet everyone in the room is looking at me like, declare it, and I don't?
There's a provision that an individual can bring a complaint, and in your bylaws, it says that you as a Board of Education serve as your own ethics commission.
Okay.
And so you would be the ones who make that decision as to whether that was a violation, a knowing and intentional violation by the individual. So, in the past, there's been some question, but actually, we wouldn't go to the Public Ethics Act Commission. It would be you are your own ethics commission.
Okay, you're up.
all right, I'm on the hot seat. The only thing more exciting than Utah's Public Employees Ethics Act is Utah's Open and Public Meetings Act. So hang in there a little bit. We're almost about halfway there. So our roadmap here, we'll discuss the general rule from the Open and Public Meeting Act, a couple of definitions, the notice requirements, which Lorraine mostly handles, the agenda requirement, same thing, minutes and recording of open meetings, and then closing an open meeting, recording a closed meeting, electronic communications outside of meetings such as email, and then training and enforcement. So we begin with the kind of overarching legal principle here with this act, and that is that it should be broadly interpreted, so kind of liberally interpreted. And the flip side of that is that exceptions are to be strictly or limitedly construed, and that's from case law. So some definitions. What is a public body? And this is verbatim, so it means an administrative, advisory, executive or legislative body of the state or subdivision, and then there's 4 specific requirements. It's created by a constitution, statute, rule, ordinance, and so on. It consists of 2 or more people. It expends tax revenue, and it's vested with the authority to make decisions regarding the public's business. I think we all can agree that this board is a public body. But I got a question. There's an education board here. So, question, what about a task force or a working group formed by this board? Is that a public body? What do you think?
Depends on how many board members are on it.
Well, let's go through the 4 items there. So is it created by rule or resolution? Yeah. Constitute. So let's say the task force, the school fees task force, or the UPAC task force, or a working group, consists of 2 or more people. So I think there are 15-member, 11 members, so yes, on number 2. Number 3, does it expend or is it supported by tax revenue in part, maybe? I think you could say yeah, because it has staff that support. How about number 4, though? Is it vested, or is a task force or a working group vested with authority to make decisions? No, that's right. So even though it's advisory, it just makes recommendations to this board. So that's why it is not considered, or I would at least argue, it is not considered a public body. Meeting. Meeting means 3 things here. The convening of a public body. We just defined the public body. You have a quorum present. We'll talk about that here in a minute. And that there's a discussion about a matter over which the public body has jurisdiction or power, and it does not include your Christmas party or any other kind of social meeting. Electronic meetings. An electronic meeting is a public meeting convened or conducted by means of a conference using electronic communication. So what if, for example, you wanted to send an email to your 14 other colleagues on the board to discuss, say, the school fees rule? Is that considered an electronic meeting? An email? What do you think? I think so. It's convened and conducted by means of electronics, not just audio. It could be an email. And it's a conference using electronic communication. I think you could argue that an email discussion that could be considered an electronic meeting. So in other words, you just got to be careful. Now, that doesn't prohibit you from having discussions with some of your colleagues, but just be aware that could be troubling. What is a quorum? So a quorum means a simple majority or membership of a public body. So here would be 8 out of the 15. Carol.
It's okay if I speak.
You bet.
Except that, Brian, and I've had this conversation before with some board members, if you look at 52-4-210, see what you think about that as it relates to the statement you just made in terms of having email conversations back and forth.
No. All right. Okay.
I mean, could you want me to read it to you?
Yeah, go ahead. I don't have
Nothing
that.
in this chapter. Oh, just all these things.
Well, I was hitting her.
Nothing in this chapter shall be construed to restrict a member of a public body from transmitting an electronic message to other members of the public body at a time when the public body is not convened in an open meeting.
As long as you don't have a quorum.
Yeah, that's. I said I think that's fine. If you had a couple of colleagues that you wanted to specifically address, but once you hit, I think, as Michelle just said, 8 or more, you've got a quorum, then I think you get into a potential meeting.
Even though it doesn't say that and does not restrict.
I think you could argue that.
A member of a public body from transmitting to other members of the public body.
Yeah, there's some case law in that, not specific to Utah, but that has addressed that and has seen, the courts in those cases have seen when you are actually, it amounts to deliberating about an issue that you're going to be making a decision about in the future, and you're involving more than a quorum, that it's seen as. So we haven't made that decision here in Utah. I'm not sure that we want to be the ones that make the court case decision for it. But Brian's advice is just that if you're not reaching the level of having a quorum of members, to have that discussion ahead of time so that you get some of each other's ideas and kind of share concerns, that's not a problem. But if you make your deliberation so that it's done electronically when it should have been in an open meeting, we just want to.
Can I ask another question, Chair?
You bet.
And I'm sorry, I don't want to belabor this, but I think this is something that frequently happens, we've seen with the board. So I think it's maybe important to clarify. If it's not something that's currently something the board will decide, is that a factor in these other court cases?
Yes, it is.
Where it's imminent or it's coming up, rather it's something more ongoing, maybe about the curriculum or?
Yes. In the court cases that I have read and seen decisions on, it did matter that it was an issue that was going to be coming before the board.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, notice. There's a notice requirement in the act, and that's it has to be published before 24 hours before the meeting, and it has to have reasonable specificity to notify the public of the topics that are going to be considered. So we list each topic. And the idea there is just a couple hours before a meeting, you can't just change the agenda or because the public just does not have notice. So there's some kind of due process elements behind this requirement. Exception is there can be an emergency or unforeseen circumstances, but that would be rare. Agenda. There's no final action that can be taken unless the topic is on the agenda. Two exception again would be, one would be an emergency meeting. A second exception would be a topic that's raised by the public. So maybe public comment, you got a public hearing, then a member of the public comes up and addresses a different issue. But in that situation, there can be no action taken upon.
There's a question, Board Member Ellis.
Well, I think that sometimes this has been taken as we can't even talk about a topic that hasn't been specifically 24-hour noticed, but you're saying that we just can't make any final decisions on it.
Oh, so if you wanted to add the hour before a completely new topic and without giving, that would violate the notice requirement. So
That
I
would
think,
violate the notice of it,
Yeah.
but someone could bring up something if we were in a discussion and then it made them think of something and then.
yeah, if it was raised by the public, a member of the
Right.
public, something new, I would say that would be okay to discuss, but not to act on.
Oh, raised by the public. Okay, thank you.
Written minutes and a recording must be kept of all open meetings. That's pretty basic. The contents of written meetings, so they have to include the names of the members present and absent. So if you're not here, that does actually go in the minutes. The substance of everything is discussed, proposed, and decided. A record of the votes that are taken by each member, name of every non-board member who provides testimony or comments, and any other information that a member requests to be entered into the minutes. Content of recording of an open meeting, it basically just has to be complete and it has to be unedited of the entire portion of the meeting. And then it's labeled appropriately. Public record, the pending minutes of an open meeting, they have to be available to the public in 30 days. And then once minutes are approved, they have to be available to the public within 3 days after approval. And then a recording of an open meeting has to be available to the public within 3 days after the meeting. Official record. So question number 2, official record. What is the official record? Is it of an open meeting? Is it the audio recording? Is it the approved minutes? Or is it the summary? Any ideas? Can an audio, Lorraine? It's approved minutes. It has to be approved by the board. Then that becomes the actual record. So I guess you could go back and reference an audio, but that would not be the actual official record. In other words, if it went to court, then the approved minutes would be the official record. There is the approved minutes, but not the recording, or the official record of action taken at an open meeting. So the general rule is every meeting is open except when it is closed by the body. Every meeting is open to the public. All right, so question then. A meeting can be closed if, is it A, 2/3 of the members present vote to close it, or B, a majority of the members present vote to close it? Majority or 2/3? It's 2/3. Yep. A quorum is present, and you need 2/3 of the board members have to vote to close. So in theory, you could refuse to close a meeting if you didn't have that 2/3. The reasons for holding a closed meeting would include the location of the closed meeting, and the vote by name of each member must be publicly announced and entered on the minutes of the open meeting in which the closed meeting was approved. And an ordinance, rule, regulation, contract, or appointment may not be approved in a closed meeting. That's fairly basic. Purpose of a closed meeting. So 2 of these are fake. Let's see if you can pick them out. The closed meeting can only be held, let's see, the first bullet, character, professional competence, or mental health, physical health of an individual, collective bargaining, strategy sessions, pending or reasonably imminent litigation, strategy sessions, real property, purchase of real property, strategy sessions, discussing security, personnel, devices, or systems. Discussions regarding closed legislative bill files. Investigative proceedings regarding criminal conduct, allegations. Last two, deliberations where this board is acting as an evaluation committee or protest officer regarding procurement appeals. And last one, strategy session to discuss failing schools. So which two? There's two of those that are fake. That's right. So legislative discussion of legislative bills is not subject to closed and meeting. Neither is failing schools. Recording closed meetings. A closed meeting shall be recorded and may have detailed written minutes, but there's an exception to that of when it cannot be recorded. Any ideas? Oh, yes.
Okay. Board Member Lear.
Going back to your reasonableness, we had a rather interesting exchange about this before anyway, but the reasonably imminent litigation, is there case law about pending or reasonably imminent?
That defines it further? No, I'm not aware of it.
I'm not aware of any. I could research it for you.
No, I'm
not aware of
No,
any.
I still don't believe that there was reasonably imminent litigation regarding school fees. So just saying that for the record. But right. I think that's an interesting, because reasonably imminent sounds reasonably immediate. So
identifiable.
So an exception to Lorraine recording a closed meeting would be if there's a discussion of character, professional competence, mental health, or security issues. In those two situations, then there is not a recording or detailed written minutes. And closed meeting minutes or the recording are protected records under grandma, subject to disclosure by court. Text and emails, nothing in the act shall be construed to restrict a board member from transmitting electronic message. I think this is the verbiage that Carol just quoted, to other board members at a time when the board is not convened in an open meeting. Training the chair of the board. So Chair Huntsman shall ensure that all members are provided with annual training of the requirements. That's what we're doing today.
Question on that. That means we can't be texting each other while we're in the middle of the meeting. Right?
Well, you mean, so if you wanted to text one or two or all 15?
Go back to your slide.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go.
So,
I have it up
question is, what about text messages when a meeting is convened?
Doesn't address it.
Well, yeah, I think that would be an electronic communication for sure. And who are you directing the text to? Is it a single person or is it all 14?
Is one okay?
I think, I don't think that's a problem. Yeah. Let's see, training, we just talked about that. Enforcement, the Attorney General's office enforces the act and provides notice to the board of any changes, material changes. If a person disrupts a public meeting, to the extent that orderly conduct is seriously compromised, the person can be removed. And any final action taken in violation of certain sections. So what happens if there's action that's taken in violation of the Open and Public Meeting Act? What happens to that action? Any ideas? Yes.
It's voidable. It's not void, it's voidable.
It's voidable
Board
by
Member Lear wants to answer that.
She got it.
I
That's
beat
right.
you to it.
All right.
Finally, criminal penalty. If you knowingly or intentionally violate this, just like with the Public Employees Ethics Act, there's the knowing and intentional component there, then you're in violation and thus guilty of a Class B misdemeanor. Any more questions? Very good.
So I'm not seeing any other questions. And I'm surprised. So there's a lot in this. But part of this was when we find ourselves getting into the gray area, or you find yourself getting into that gray area, is what might be a simple communication of an FYI that board members might say, oh, well, I've read this article, or I saw this, and those are fine to shoot out there for your awareness, but especially but if it has something to do with what's coming on our agenda or potentially on our agenda, and we start trying to solve the problem, and we start having exchanges and comments and things like that, that's when we start getting into the gray and into, I believe, non-compliant. So just a heads up, I think every board member welcomes information and data that in a FYI type of situation to help us with our awareness. There's nothing wrong with that. So I just want to make sure you guys are very comfortable that you can shoot those out, but it's that exchange that happens afterwards that might compromise us a little bit. But we have good AAGs that will help us with that. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you for the presentation. We are informed. We're in compliance. And so, Ms. Lorraine, on these forms we've got to get filled out, you want them ASAP, right? So say you'll receive them today?
Or by the next board meeting, but today.
Or by the next board meeting? Okay. All right, thank you. Okay. Moving forward, we want to invite Deputy Superintendent Patty Norman. Will you? What's that?
There's a few. I think we've got 2 people here.
Okay, I'm going to invite. Yeah, I'm going to have her. I'm going to have her. So, and will you come up and introduce what were your? Give us a quick overview. We've got guests here. Also, if you could handle those recognitions and inform the board what we're going to be doing here for the next about an hour's time. So we want to invite everyone. Okay. Deputy Superintendent Patty Norman.
Thank you. First of all, I'm going to invite up Wendy Hart, who is going to come up, and she's going to be doing a presentation that she requested of the board. And so for the next hour, so from 3:15 to about 4:15, we're going to be having a math panel as well. So the first few minutes will be dedicated to hearing some concerns from Wendy Hart, and then we're going to have a math panel that will be coming up as well. And once we get them seated around the table, then we'll go ahead and do those introductions and let you know how the rest of the flow will go.
Okay, so we'd like to invite Wendy Hart.
Yes, and Sherry. Yes. Okay.
Each one of you have
Yes,
to
yes,
stand
yes.
close to those mics. They don't.
Oh, and they don't move. Okay. But they turn. Okay.
Now, Wendy, you've got probably a lot of different titles. I see it. You wear many hats, but today you're in the capacity of.
So should I?
As you do your introduction, that would be
Well,
nice.
my only hat now is mom and citizen. So I used to be on the Alpine School Board until December 31st. So.
Okay.
Now no more.
You get on just 1 second.
So we have both those mics are on.
Okay.
All right, I'll introduce myself. My name is Mark Minson. I'm a resident of Harriman. I am joining Wendy in this presentation/discussion. I have 2 daughters that grew up in the Canyon School District from kindergarten through 12th grade, so I'm a parent who has plenty of experience in the district.
Okay.
So do you want more? I mean, I don't know what people know. So Mark has a tutoring service, Mathnasium, if you're familiar with that. So he's used to working with people who have issues with math. I have a degree in mathematics from BYU, and I own my own data migration business, and have been doing that for, almost 20 years. So, self-described math geek.
And if you'd like me to elucidate on that a little bit too. I started the first Mathnasium, which is a math instruction franchise. Started 10 years ago in 2008 with the first one in Draper, and it's grown to 12 or so locations statewide. There's over 900 locations nationwide, and we're strictly a math learning center. We teach math to kids from K through 12 after school weekend type program. So that's kind of what I do. Professionally, I was a software developer and consultant for many years, and moved on to this after spending several years tutoring all the kids in my neighborhood as they came up through the school. So my experience has been both personal and professional in teaching math.
It should, but don't touch your volume.
Should go through. Okay. So, and then we had also invited Chad Copier, who is a teacher, a high school math teacher at Skyridge High School in Lehigh. And when we got notice that the meeting, our time changed, he was unable to make it. So he did a recording. And so I'm going to present that first, and then we'll go to Mark, and then I'll follow up. Hopefully, and as Mark said, his presentation's about 5 minutes. He could talk for 30. Altogether, we'll have 15 minutes, and we could talk for about 5 hours, but you probably want to go home tonight. So, cross your fingers. Yeah, it's not. Oops.
Oops. Check your sound at the bottom.
Yeah, that's got an X on it, so right here.
Yeah, well, the air media should
do it
cancel
anyway.
that out.
Oh.
Air media. If you want to hold on, and I don't know if you want to do this, I can run down and grab a hard wire and hardwire you in.
Okay. I also have it on thumb drive. If there's another computer, we could put it on too. We could have him at the end too. We can.
Sometimes the drivers aren't compatible with the air media. So let me go grab a wire, and I'll be right back.
Okay. But everything else is just visuals, so we'll just go from there. So I'll just let Mark start off. The main premise of what we're wanting to present today is just that our current math program and process, there is a significant portion, whether that's a majority or a minority, there's a significant portion of students that are walking away without fundamental basic math facts that are important. So let me set this up, and we'll turn the time over to Mark. Maybe. Maybe I have to do it this way. There we go. Sorry, I'm getting old. Can't see things.
Okay, as I said, I run a math instruction service. It wasn't my intent when I went to school and got a computer science degree to end up here, but after tutoring for many years out of my own home, I decided I could reach more kids this way. So over the past 10 years, we've taught over 3,000 kids with the 3 centers that I own. And I have found over the last couple of years that there have been there's been a marked increase in the number of parents who are coming to us seeking our services. More and more parents are realizing their kids are going through school, whether it's elementary, middle, or high school, and finding their kids simply are not mastering the basics of mathematical instruction they think they should have. Parents come to us regularly and say, even I, with my elementary school kids, though I know math very well, I'm unable to teach them the math that they're supposed to be learning because the way that the kids are being taught in the schools is, I mean, I don't want to put words in everybody's mouth, but they use words like convoluted and misleading and incomprehensible and confusing to the kids. So this is parents talking about how they're trying to help their kids with math and are unable to. Teachers are frequently telling me that the kids in their classes are struggling to master the basic concepts because they spend so much time preparing for these tests they've got coming up. They spend more time doing test prep than they do, well, I won't say more time, but more time than they feel is necessary preparing the kids to take these tests than actually doing the math instruction. Kids are taught how to manipulate the numbers, but not what that means, not understanding the concepts. And that's what parents are so frustrated with, is you bet my kid can sit there and write out a problem and get the answer, but they have no idea what it means. We regularly hire high school students, juniors and seniors, who are great at math. We expect that they have taken or are currently enrolled in an AP Calculus course. And of those kids that come in, we have a math aptitude test that we require them to take. And these are kids who have scored extremely high, 4s and 5s on the AP Calculus test. They are in the highest levels of math in the high schools, and they come to us and they take our aptitude test, which is basic arithmetic, pre-algebra, geometry, and up through some Algebra 2 questions. And these kids are getting 50 and 60% of the questions right on our aptitude test when they have passed the AP Calculus test with a 4 or a 5, which tells me that they are not understanding any concepts. They know how to manipulate the numbers, but they don't know what those things mean. Parents come to us voluntarily because they see that their kids are not mastering these mathematical concepts. They are not prepared for the next class. They are regularly moved into the next class when they haven't mastered the concepts. There is no holding back of these kids, and the parents are extremely frustrated when they come to me and saying, I don't know what else I can do. And we have been very successful in reversing that trend amongst the kids who come to us, because we are not worrying about them taking a test. We're simply worrying about them mastering individual concepts. We find that parents come to us and say, I never see homework come home for my kid. And believe me, I'm not here to criticize the teachers. I'm not here to criticize the schools. I'm simply stating what parents come to me with. I don't know what goes on in the classrooms, and I simply am repeating what I hear from so many parents saying that they don't understand why their kids come home with 5 homework problems or a worksheet and then they're tested on this stuff. When we have kids in sports or in music or in dance or whatever, they spend hours and hours and hours of practice on one single step or performance or whatever it is, and we try to impart that same message to kids with math. They got to practice, and they got to practice. They got to spend more and more time to really master these things, and I'm finding they can't do this. The slide that you see up here is an example of the questions that we expect kids should be able to answer mentally when they are in these grades. And we send these out to parents to say, ask your kids if they can answer this question. And 90% of the time they can't. And this is whatever grade level it is, and many parents can't answer as well, but that's another discussion. And so this is where parents say, I want to help my kid with the math, but I'm unable to. I'm uncomfortable with the kind of math they're teaching, and I simply am not equipped to make them understand what these concepts are. So that's where we take over and help them understand that. And I'm over what time I have, so I'll turn it back over to Wendy.
Okay. So I'm going to try and play this again. Hopefully we'll get audio this time. Any thoughts? May have to just send it to you. Should have put it on YouTube or something.
Far too many high school freshmen and sophomores are entering my classes without the necessary fundamental skills to succeed in high school math.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you for your time today. I am currently a math teacher at Skyridge High School in Lehigh. I hold a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering and practiced law for many years before teaching math, which I love. Far too many high school freshmen and sophomores are entering my classes without the necessary fundamental skills to succeed in high school math classes. They lack the basic skills with multiplication and division, as well as a working understanding of fractions and fraction operations. The basic algebraic equation manipulation skills they desperately need are deficient for close to half of my students. We as a math department spend a tremendous amount of time teaching what kids should already know coming in. I wish I had more time to show you examples of these issues. We are working hard to fill in the gaps and get these kids to meet standards. But every moment we spend teaching remedial basic skills is time that is not spent teaching high school math. I recently met with math teachers from our feeder junior high who are struggling with similar deficiencies. They share our concerns with the lack of basic skills. As a father of 6 school-aged kids, the youngest being 7, I also have an insight into how math is being taught at the elementary and junior high levels. As a math educator and lifelong math-brained person, I understand why things are being taught the way they are in elementary. But I also strongly believed that such methods are ineffective. My kids are being taught how to solve certain types of problems in multiple ways with the goal of getting kids to understand why. However, many of the multiple ways are just simple tricks, brain teasers that will not actually teach anything. People who comprehend math come to understand and develop these tricks on their own. However, this is a one-way street because they are just tricks. Seeing the trick cannot lead to deeper understanding without a solid grasp of basic skills. Instead, it is only through a solid grasp of the basic skills that lead to discovery and understanding of the tricks. I strongly encourage a focus on basic math skills. For example, kids should have multiplication math facts memorized. This is because that memorization helps greatly with fraction operations and basic algebraic manipulations. With those skills, algebra concepts can be grasped and learned. This is a critical point. Because a firm grasp of algebra makes all higher math accessible, conversely, a lack of basic algebra skills shuts the door on ever understanding any of the high school math essentials. Which brings me to my final point. The current course standards are far too broad, and the adopted integrated approach means far too few curriculum resources. In nearly every district in the state, teachers have been forced to write their own curriculum. This might sound okay, but let me explain the ramifications of this. First, it is impossible to teach all standards. Since it's impossible to teach all standards, teachers pick which standards they will teach while abandoning others. Second, this means there will be a different scope and sequence, at least for every district, and often between schools in the same district. A kid moving schools within Alpine District mid-year, for example, has very little hope of encountering math that matches what had been taught at the previous school. This problem is far worse for kids transferring from out of state. Third, if teachers must create their own curriculum by picking and choosing from the core, that curriculum will be out of sync in scope and sequence from any other class from a different school. Then there is very little value in even having a core. I'm Chad Copier. If you'd like more information, please feel free to contact me.
Well, I can provide email addresses for everyone if you have more questions. I just want to follow up. Again, the focus on understanding on process and procedure, it is not leading to understanding or an ability to do. I am a pianist and a harpist, and so I'm going to use music as my analogy, but much of what is touted as deeper learning is like music theory and composition classes. They're addenda, they may be helpful in some way, but if you spend all your time on music theory and you never sit down at the piano and practice playing the piece, you can't play the piece. And that's what I see us trying to do. We're hoping by giving them this music theory that they're going to be able to play Rachmaninoff's, piano concerto. They won't be able to. Practice does make perfect. Some of the skills that are missing, as we've mentioned, are the math facts. The coherent concepts, they don't build on each other. The way that things are coming through, you'll learn about one concept here and another concept over there. I liken it to throwing math concepts on 3 different dartboards and then pulling them off in random order. And you'll get some information that way, but where it doesn't build, it's kind of a short-term solution. Kids will be able to pass the classes and the tests in a short-term fashion, but because it's not built on, they don't remember it for very long, and they don't have that way of going back. What Mark mentioned about kids in AP Calculus, I've had 2 kids in AP Calculus now, and both of them have had the same experience where they understand calculus just fine, but it's all the background information that they really struggle with. Patterns and order, a lot of things, again, partly because of calculators, but if you look at those decimal numbers, those are equivalent to the numbers below. You can see a pattern in the fractions below where that pattern doesn't exist in the numbers. So how we present things, and if kids are asked to use calculators a lot, sometimes they're going to miss those innate patterns that open everything up to them. I want to give you an example of procedure and process. This is basically straight out of a first grade standard. If you ask me to do this problem, 8 toys in the chest, 6 toys on the shelf, I'm going to go 8 plus 6, that's 14. Okay, but if you look at those equations down below, not a one of those says 8 plus 6 is 14. Now, the actual answer is D because it is the only one that has 14 as an answer, and that's where I came to that understanding. But this is directly out of our math standards. But knowing this standard doesn't mean that I understand 8 plus 6. I don't know if you can see this, but it actually gives this example here. 8 plus 6 equals 8 plus 2 plus 4, and so forth. Here's another example of process over the actual understanding of math. 2 times 5/12, the actual answer there is 5/6. I can do that in my head, but doing it on a number line is much more involved. If you look at the grading rubric, you get 1 point for getting the answer right, but you get 2 points for being able to explain in English how you got the answer. Now, my kids, when they would then explain their answer, they would say, "Do because of math." A mathematician explains their answer by doing the actual math, not translating it into English. But if this is the question on your test as an example, then you're going to train kids how to do it with the number line and answer with the appropriate knowledge with, you can train kids how to do this without understanding the actual algebraic manipulation behind 2 times 5/12. Testing especially is the enforcement mechanism. Testing and standards drive the instruction, and our standards do include teaching methods, and the tests that were created also include those teaching methods. I'm hoping with RISE, not that I've seen it, that we've removed some of that, but as long as it's in the test, it is what people are going to teach, whether that's what the teachers want or not, because what is measured, what is tested, will improve, and that's what we're telling our teachers is important. So we run into problems with like charter schools that are focused on traditional math, and most charter schools now have had to adopt additional testing practices. There was one charter school where the teacher actually didn't change anything at all, but did a lot more test prep, and the scores improved just because of the test prep. So the question is, do we want the kids to understand math, or do we want test prep? The bottom line is these basic skills are lacking. So really quickly, proposed solutions, and I forgot to start my timer, so I have no idea how long I've been going, so just, shut me down when you need me to. I'm going to go through these 4. These are just the 4 most basic. The first one is to adopt standards with a track record for success. The standards that we adopted in 2010 had never been proven anywhere. California's 1997 standards are rated by Fordham Foundation as an A. You can debate Fordham, but they do say that they are considered the gold standard, internationally benchmarked. In short, everything that people claim they want, California math standards were there. Massachusetts' 2000 standards also have a 13-year track record before they were replaced in 2010. Utah's 2007 math standards were developed in conjunction with the K-12 teachers in this state as well as higher education teachers in this state. Fordham rated them an A- and said that the high school content, and they mentioned it twice, is exceptionally strong. Again, Utah only had 3 years on that before we adopted a different set of standards, and I'm not sure what was lacking in those because I can't see that there was a lot that was lacking in that, especially at the high school content. Focus on practicing foundational concept. We've talked about this. Mr. Copier said that the kids in his classes can usually do the first one. They can't do the second one, but it's the same algebraic concepts in both. Remove pedagogy from standards and test questions, kind of address that briefly, back to this example. If we do have to keep our current standards, we would like to suggest some resequencing and giving more options. One of the first problems is that we are currently, if you want kids to get to calculus, we are currently cramming 4 years worth of math into 3 years. I'll give you an example of that. On the left, in the purple, is what our 2007 regular students would take. Note they start Algebra 1 in 8th grade, they get to calculus in 12th grade, they take all of those intervening 4 years worth of math in those 4 years between 8th and 11th grade. Okay, the blue is what our regular kids are taking now on the far right. They don't even make it to calculus. They don't even have the option unless they, left, sorry, I'm really bad with right and left. Just ask my husband. Turn left, no, the other left. Okay, blue is, they don't even get to calculus. Green, you can get to calculus, but we don't start the vast majority of our Algebra 1 concepts until 9th grade, which means that we're taking those 4 years, cramming them into 3 years to get to calculus, and the teachers have said that the kids are not adequately prepared for calculus. They're making it by hook and by crook and working a lot on their own, but it's a struggle. The other pathway is the accelerated pathway that we do in Alpine School District, where they have to start and get into that accelerated pathway in 7th grade. So if we could look at our standards in some way to resequence them so that the Algebra 1 concepts start in 8th grade, that would be fantastic, as well as allowing an option for non-integrated math so that we actually teach Algebra 1, then geometry, then Algebra 2. A lot of geometry is going by the wayside, and again, it's this idea that standards and concepts have to build on each other. So I mentioned that traditional versus integrated. Another thing just to throw out there, because I'm here, Secondary 3 is a prerequisite, and I realize you have to go to the Board of Regents to talk to them about this for concurrent enrollment. Mr. Copier said specifically he has about 60% of his kids that he teaches Secondary 1 and 2 that can pass Secondary 2, but will struggle with the Secondary 3 concepts, but would be successful in a concurrent 1010 and 1030 coursework. If they don't pass Secondary 3, they have to go back down to 7th grade math with decision making to graduate from high school. Whereas if they could take Math 1010, they would already have a concurrent enrollment class under their belt, and it would qualify for their math. So those are the 4 suggestions if we keep our current standards. Just to finish up with a quote from Galileo, "The universe cannot be read until we have learnt the language and become familiar with the characters in which it is written. It is written in mathematical language, and the letters are triangles, circles, and other geometrical figures, without which means it is humanly impossible to comprehend a single word." The goal of math is not necessarily to become a computer programmer, but it is to understand the world in which we live. And as he said, the world, the universe was created in the language of mathematics, and we want to give those kids that understanding. We need to do it by focusing on foundational principles. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent Patty, I'm sure we're going to have some questions, but we probably want to set up that panel, and
So we're gonna,
what's next?
so what's next is Nathan Ock will give the data overview, and then we're gonna have the panel of the 4 panel members at that time. So he's gonna give a quick 5-minute data overview, and then the panel will come.
Okay, all right.
So,
Do you want me to stay here?
you're more than welcome to stay,
Okay.
or whatever you'd like. Yeah, and we'll bring another chair up. And in moving forward with this while he's setting up, first of all, I just have to say,
Okay, we're good.
first of all, I have to say that I have been so excited about today to be able to sit here with people who love mathematics. It doesn't matter what this day is, for us to be discussing mathematics in depth, I am on cloud 9. So thank you. And however this came to be, I would like to thank every single person who said, let's go ahead and talk about math. So with that language of mathematics, Wendy and I have talked on the phone, with that language of mathematics, it's actually what we have as dinner time conversations at my house. So I'm just feeling kind of at home right now and appreciate all the work that's gone into this, so thank you. So first we're going to have Nathan Ock, and he is the official title, Early College and STEM Education Specialist, to talk about the state of mathematics, and then we'll move into the panel.
Thanks, Patty, and thanks for the opportunity to share some math data with the board and the community at large. The infographic in front of you was kind of compiled by a number of leaders throughout our community, and it kind of tells the story of elementary through early college mathematical data over the last few years in Utah. So Utah students today have a higher quality of math education than at any time in our state's history. But despite the countless successes mathematics communities across the state are experiencing, there's still a number of students that can be supported more effectively. Consider the mathematical experiences a child has in Utah schools today. As an elementary student, that child's receiving high-quality mathematics instruction from teachers that are more consistently engaging in team-based problem solving, allowing them to more effectively make data-based decisions. Teams of teachers across our state are collaborating in professional learning communities, or PLCs, more often than at any time in the past, allowing them to discuss how best to serve each child across classrooms instead of in isolation. It's partly because of these changes that our children's performance on both state and national level assessments is trending upwards over the last 5 years. Our children are now leaving elementary school better prepared to be effective mathematical thinkers than ever before. In the past, when a child arrived in middle school, their proficiency rates on standardized tests plummeted. This was especially true for students with disabilities. A group of educator leaders from across the state have come together to establish a state systemic improvement plan, which seeks to change this. The gap between general education, or gen ed students, and students with disabilities has shrunk significantly, due in part to this initiative. This work has been part of the impetus for the astounding 22% increase over the last 6 years our 9th grade students with disabilities have experienced earning mathematics credit, as you can see from the infographic. For the first time in our state's history, the majority of students receiving special education services are finishing their freshman year of high school with the math credit that puts them on track to graduate. Gen Ed students today are also experiencing gains, with 9th graders experiencing a 15% increase when compared to 2014 data, 10th graders experiencing an 11% increase, and 11th graders an 8% increase. Students today are taking integrated secondary math classes that incorporate elements of algebra, geometry, and statistics into each year's work. These classes are far more rigorous than the algebra, geometry, algebra 2 classes that students were formerly provided. This means that our students are performing better despite being engaged in more challenging work. Today, over 50% of Utah's graduating students earned college credit during high school through the Concurrent Enrollment, or CE program. Over 25% of Utah graduates earned college credit through AP test passage, and mathematics is one of the top credits issued in both AP and CE. This college-level coursework in high school, alongside students' exposure to more advanced secondary math course loads, have contributed to first-year math remediation at Utah universities decreasing by 14% over the last 18 years. In 2008, almost half of incoming freshmen at Utah universities were taking remedial math classes. These classes are expensive for students, often repeated numerous times, and have been shown to be a factor in dropout. Today, only 1/3 of incoming freshmen are taking these courses. Despite all the bright spots, we still have a lot of progress to make in order to effectively support each and every student's educational journey. We've seen all state disaggregated ethnic groups maintain or increase their performance regarding ACT college readiness benchmarks between 2016 and 2018, but there continues to be a gap between the performance of these groups and the performance of white students. Additionally, despite closing the gap, students receiving services for disabilities continue to achieve lower rates of proficiency in standardized testing, course completion, and graduation than their gen ed peers. Despite the progress I mentioned previously, we still have more progress to make if we're to have Utah students taking math courses that will count towards their major their first year at university, and that's all students. Finally, the Utah core mathematics standards have changed 4 times in the past 10 years. This has made it really challenging for LEAs to implement professional learning, for schools to implement effective PLCs incorporating the discussion of standards for all their teachers, and for teachers to gain competency in understanding and teaching those standards. Math education in Utah hasn't reached a pinnacle, but rather we're on an upwards trend related to overall proficiency, student growth, and the provision of an equal opportunity for all students to experience success. Today you've heard me say things like more than ever before and all-time high, but simply saying that we're the best we've ever been isn't good enough. When I'm participating in site visits and facilitating professional learning experiences across the state, I don't hear educators satisfied with the current achievement levels of their communities. I hear them striving to improve through more opportunities, resources, and chances to grow. Today, as a student makes their way through Utah's P-12 education system, they can look forward to receiving a more cognitively rigorous, more inclusive, and more supported mathematics experience than at any other time in our state's history. But they can also take solace in the fact that educators across the state have adopted a growth mindset regarding innovation and the dedication to consistent improvement. As Superintendent Dixon often says, Utah is on the road to awesome.
Can we have the other panel members come up? Thank you, Nathan. We appreciate that. One of the things in going through there.
Can you pull the mic a little closer? Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And we'll have our other panelists come up, and as they're coming up, I'm going to introduce who they are. So we have Melissa Garber, who's right here. And Melissa Garber, they're going to introduce themselves as well. And she is an elementary math specialist in Jordan. We have Wendy Hart, who has come as well, and she's introduced herself just a minute ago. Then we're having Mike, let me remember your last name, I got it. Mike Spencer, high school teacher at JUAB, and Amanda Cangelosian, that's University of Utah. So as you see, we have a progression from elementary to high school to our higher education as well. So a representative sampling of what's impacting mathematics and where it's at today. So we're going to start out, and we're going to have the rest of the panelists, the other 3 panelists, do a brief introduction of themselves. So spend a couple minutes on what you see the successes and challenges are with mathematics in our state. So let's go ahead.
Okay, great. So first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about math and elementary math instruction. It's one of my passions, and I agree. This has just been really exciting to hear some of the ideas and that have been discussed. Just to introduce myself, my name is Melissa Garber. I've been an educator for 22 years. My formal classroom experiences have all been in early childhood situations, so first, second grade, first, second multi-age for 4 years. I taught in a gifted and talented magnet classroom, and in Jordan School District and Canyon School District. But since 2012, I have been working as the K-6 elementary math specialist for Jordan School District. My responsibilities include working with teachers and students in a variety of situations. I get to model lessons, I get to attend PLCs, plan units, review curriculum, and additionally, I facilitate and plan math professional development for our district. I've been able to work with BYU and the BYU partnership through our Jordan School District Association, and have been integral in helping facilitate CMI comprehensive math instructions, which is used in it's a framework for instruction used in some districts across the state. I currently teach elementary math endorsement courses through UVU, and in the past I've taught the early childhood education math courses for University of Utah. I've also had the unique experience of being part of the core adoption from 2007 till now. And so I've seen a lot of the changes that have taken place, a lot of the progress that we've made, and a lot of the challenges that we have to face as far as how we implement these core standards. So some of the successes that I've seen. During my tenure as a teacher specialist, I've seen incredible successes and amazing accomplishments. I've seen a shift in how math has been taught. We've seen a definite change from using methods where a teacher stands at the front of the classroom, students are lined up in rows, it's a very quiet classroom, and they imitate steps. The shift has been moving to a more collaborative approach. I love seeing students working in groups, talking about and discussing strategies and situations and applications of math in a real-world experience. I love it when I observe in a classroom and I get math chills, that's what I call it. Everybody knows Melissa has math chills because of the powerful mathematical statements that students are making and really showing their true understanding of a concept. These shifts would not have occurred had it not been the rigorous requirements of the Utah Math Core Standards. There's a nice balance between conceptual, procedural, and representational understanding that's required. I'll speak more to some specific data in a future comment, but right now I'd just like to share some few comments from students. This is from a school that we've been working with in a CMI training. We've worked significantly with our teachers to not only help them understand the core standards, the math behind the core standards, and then also how we can help them implement it. So these are it was an anonymous survey, but these are 6th grade students. One said, I love when we use whiteboards, also when we get to use calculators and we get to work with our friends. Another said, I love almost everything about math, and I really like how we get to work alone and then talk it out with our classmates. Another said, we get to talk about math with the other students so that they can explain what they did and it might help our own understanding. Another said, I like it because it will help me become a dentist. I like it. I get to help friends and I get to learn new things every day that will help me in my life. Another said, I enjoy that I can have fun and still learn. Now, when asked what they would change in their math class, in a class of 27, 25 said nothing. One said they would like more discussion, and another said fractions. So we'll work with that kiddo. Now, some of the challenges, we know sadly that that's not the case in every math classroom in our state. While we do have a rigorous core implementation, the implementation is where it's challenging. Full implementation requires many levels of support. It doesn't require just good quality core standards, but it requires us helping teachers and supporting them through professional development opportunities, through opportunities where they can have to really look at not only math pedagogy, but how they can understand the mathematics for themselves. When teachers understand it for themselves, especially in an elementary setting where that might not have been their degree, they feel more confident to be able to work with their students.
Melissa, thank you. Amanda?
Hi, I'm Amanda Cangelosi, and I am a lecturer in the Department of Mathematics at the University of Utah. I grew up in Logan, and I received my master's degree in statistics from Utah State University and continued on to do more graduate work, receiving a post-baccalaureate at Smith College in Western Massachusetts, as well as some graduate work right here at the University of Utah, right up there, rather. I taught middle school and high school for 9 years between California and Utah, including 2 years of high school math coaching in the Salt Lake City School District. And so currently I'm a lecturer in the Department of Mathematics, where I've been for 6 years now. I'm a board member of the Utah Council of Teachers of Mathematics and currently the president of the Utah Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators. And I am so sorry, but am I speaking about successes and...
This is just introducing yourself.
This is just
Yeah,
introduction.
yeah.
Great. Okay, that is my introduction.
Yeah.
Okay, just introductions. Okay, so hi, I'm Mike Spencer. I teach at Joab High School. I've been teaching for over 10 years, and I currently serve as our department head. I'm from a small rural school, so we have a lot of hats that we have to wear, but it's given me a unique perspective. So I'm also our district math specialist, and I'm an instructional coach for our district. So I have a master's degree in secondary education with a concentration in mathematics, and I am a 2017 state finalist for the Presidential Award in Math and Science. I'm also here representing the Utah Council of Teachers of Mathematics as their high school representative, so I'm serving on that board. I have a unique perspective just in the last 10 years. Before we shifted to the core we have now in 2007, I did teach Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, and I've taught algebra. I teach Secondary 1, Secondary 2, Secondary 3, and I currently teach Calculus, AP Statistics, College Algebra, Secondary 3. So that's given me a good broad spectrum to view what students are coming across with and where their challenges are and the kind of support they need as they move forward. So that's in a nutshell for me.
Okay, thank you. I think it's so intriguing listening to everyone's experiences in mathematics and how there are successes and there's challenges. It's not all roses. So with that, we have the governor's report that was released in 2015. And in that report, there was included findings that emphasize supporting the implementation of the standards. So in your role, what are the successes and challenges with implementation of the standards in our state? And while this is being kind of passed around, I'm going to pass around, this is as some of you are new, it's talking about the difference between standards, curriculum, instruction, and assessment, and how, just as Wendy Hart said, they really do, standards drives instruction, which drives, the implementation of, and then what curriculum is chosen, and then whose role is it to decide what the standards are, which is the role of the State Board of Education, and then the curriculum is decided by the district, and the implementation in the classroom is done by a teacher that is on there. And so this kind of gives a little bit more feedback as we go back and forth between some of these terms. So the question, let me go ahead and start out with Melissa. Melissa, on this question, in your role, what do you see the successes and challenges are with implementation of the standards?
The implementation of the standards, I'll start with our successes first of all. I think our greatest successes are when we get to work strategically and specifically with teams of teachers. When we get to have long-term feedback for them with their professional development opportunities, that's when we see the greatest success. I have some specific examples of that. We know that when we work on just not only teacher instruction, but also on improving teacher content knowledge, we see powerful changes. And I think that teacher content knowledge is really driven through having teachers ask questions about, what does this mean in the core? What part of this core does that mean that I am required to help my students with? What does mastery or proficiency look like for my students at this level? So when a teacher understands the math content strongly and they are able to look at a different progression all the way from kindergarten to 6th grade, looking at my kindergarten students, when a teacher instructs them about addition is adding like things, how that impacts what a student does in 6th grade and 7th grade and 8th grade when they still have to do addition, but they're doing it with variables now. You're still adding like things, so they're understanding those concepts. And then also how those conceptual understandings lead to procedural fluency. Understanding that adding these like things, I can manipulate the numbers, but ultimately I really do want to have some procedural fluency. I have some specific data on this one. When we worked with a school, this is Rose Creek, a school at our elementary school, when we started working specifically on content and pedagogy, their grade levels scores went from 44% proficient in math to 60% proficient, just in the time that we worked with them on math. Additionally, as a side benefit, no additional professional development, but the ELA scores also went from 48% to 56%, and the science scores went from 43% to 57%. So there was this amazing residual payoff with all of those. We definitely have challenges. But my time's up, so.
Mike, with your various roles, Mike, with your various roles, it sounds like we've had Cody Hughes from Tintic talk about rural schools, and he has all of those hats as well. So I actually imagine you have even more hats than what you even talked about as you sat here today. Can you follow up on that, the successes and challenges?
Yeah, so when we first implemented the new core, I'll tell you, I had to grow as a teacher. I had to have a stronger understanding of the content that was there, and it was actually fun. It was really fun to dig in and figure out, and so Melissa mentioned getting to understand the standards and what they're saying. I feel like one of the challenges was meeting that need, because the current Utah core we have right now emphasizes this relationship between conceptual understanding and procedural fluency and how important both of those things are. And that's been one of the challenges as we've been working with teachers to talk about what is our role in helping students to really emphasize the role that conceptual understanding plays and how important that is to move towards procedural fluency, and that we should not stop just at developing conceptual understanding, that there's a balance between those. So that's been one of the challenges, is just supporting teachers as we go through that. But we've had lots of successes, and I'll tell you, since moving to the core we're in right now, it's been fun to walk into classrooms. And I think one of the biggest things that's impacted classrooms is the 8 math practices. It has been great to see that in work, as students have been responsible for critiquing the reasoning of others and justifying thinking, and what that's done to bring a community of learning to happen in the classroom, so that students are not learning in isolation, but there's a partnership in there that's been really powerful. But it also expands their role beyond mathematics, because as they're engaging in those conversations, they're learning a lot more as well that's supporting their work with that. So those are some of the challenges and successes.
Thanks, Mike. As we move on, one of the questions that's being asked, and it's not just being asked in mathematics, it's being asked in every single content that we have. But the question is, how do we determine best standards using research, and what data do we use to determine student growth? And Wendy, can you talk to us about what that, or Amanda, how about Amanda? Can you talk to us about what that means to you?
Absolutely. I do think that it's evident that we currently have the best standards that we've ever had in Utah. And I also want to note that I think this notion of best standards is a difficult one, and it doesn't, I guess I disagree with the existence of best standards for several reasons. I think there is certainly research out there, which I apologize I can't cite right now, that says the more powerful driving force for effective teaching and student performance is instructional strategies over the particular standards that an entity chooses, so that most highly performing entities don't change their standards so much as they focus their energy on instruction. What I've seen at the university level is we definitely see students are noticeably more prepared than ever to meet the classroom expectations of a 1,000 or 2,000 level course, so intermediate algebra through calculus and linear algebra. I don't know that this is well known in the P through 12 community, but educational research influences university instruction too. So the 8 practice standards that Mike was talking about, having been informed by 40 plus years of research, developed and vetted by experts representing a wide variety of stakeholders. Those practice standards are consistent with the research that informs our university instruction. So the university classrooms are transforming too. If we're concerned about success in college, the Utah core standards as they currently stand, I think particularly the integrated nature of them, they offer welcome support for what we want to achieve in the college classroom. So the collaborative learning comes as a surprise to a lot of people, but there's a big push for lab sections in large auditorium-sized classrooms where students engage in small group discussions. And I'm so sorry that my time is up. You know there was somebody back there.
It's very sly with timing. With that, thank you. It's really important what we're talking about, and that instructional component that comes with the teaching, regardless of what the standard is. If we don't have good instruction, then we won't have good outcomes in our classroom. And I think Wendy, you spoke to that as well, and even following it up with Mike's comment about that fluency component that comes along with a conceptual understanding, that we do need to have both with that, so that we can actually play the music as well as the language of mathematics that goes along with it. So in moving to what our next question is, so in your role as a parent, a teacher, or policymaker, how have you seen the standards impact student learning? So if we're talking about the standards themselves, how have you seen that impact student learning? And let's go ahead and start with Mike.
So when I look at how the standards have impacted things, there's a couple of cases I can think of specifically. For example, there's a much deeper emphasis on data and statistics in the core that we have now compared to what we had before, which is so important for the world we live in now. And that's shown as I've worked with kids in Secondary 1, Secondary 2, Secondary 3, and I see them come even into an AP statistics course. They are coming with a much stronger foundation. So, and I've seen similar things like in calculus. There's an emphasis on rate of change and the role that plays in functions, and the conceptual understanding students are coming into calculus with because they understand the nature of rate of change and things in there. There's also the other emphasis that the standards have done, because the 8 practices are there to support students, and those are part of our core. Students are coming in more willing to engage in challenging problems. And that's an important aspect as we go in and we're working in upper level, well, in any mathematics. We need this ability for students to take on challenging problems and persevere in solving them. And I've seen these standards make a direct impact on that with students. As students enact the practice of justifying their thinking and critiquing the reasoning of others, it has supported their development of the language of mathematics and the precision in their communication. More focus on procedural fluency and conceptual understanding. So this conceptual understanding has been a support for learners that struggle with rote memorization, and how important that is, that oftentimes students struggle to memorize, but if they have something to anchor to with a concept, then it supports that learning a little bit better. So those are just a few examples I have where the standards themselves have supported that.
Wendy, can you follow up on that?
Deputy Superintendent Norman, we have a question from a board member, so whenever you're ready,
Okay.
we can finish
So
up
we
with
have-
this
yeah.
follow-up, and then we'll...
We have, do you want us to get through there's this question and one more, and then we were going to ask questions of the board?
Let me just ask, is it pertaining to some data that was just shared, or
We can do this
Board
however
Member
you'd
Lisa
like.
Cummins?
Just, with this panel, I would just like to hear the responses from these same questions from Wendy and Mark, if I won't mind, because I think it's pertinent to the discussion. I think we have a lot of pros, but I'm not hearing a lot of the concerns, and I think that would be more coming from Wendy and Mark. Everybody's great here, but what are the concerns? I'm not hearing the concerns.
Okay, well, let's go through the let's stay on the panel, and then we'll
And-
get to those concerns, but
And as
Wendy and
part-
Mark
yeah.
had 15 or so minutes that also spent on having a chance to talk about those concerns. I just want to bring that back, but we haven't had a debate or anything, but to these questions, so.
And
You want to
s-
finish the follow-up?
And I'm going to speak to the makeup of how we decided on the panel, and that is that everyone would have a chance to answer equally a beginning question and follow-up questions as we were going through for equivalent time. And we have a timekeeper up here, and if you want to raise your hand. And so as we're going through, we're having people that are speaking to a main question and follow-up questions as well to try and reflect that. And usually we've started with some of the successes on this, and so the point taken, we can start with some of the challenges instead of starting with the success and be able to address some of those in that time. So thank you for that, pointing that out. Wendy?
Okay, so I'll speak to that. The most noticeable thing that I've seen is the coherence, that what I mentioned, that it doesn't build. We are missing a lot of geometry because of so many things being pushed together. The math teacher that you saw, he said, if I have to choose between a geometric concept and an algebraic concept, I'm going to choose an algebraic concept because those algebraic concepts are going to get you further along. But when I was in school, I had to take an entire year of geometry. What we learned there was logical thinking and proofs. We had to prove absolutely everything. It didn't directly relate to geometry, but it was very strong. Again, the fluency, the kids are not getting the fluency, and that's incorporated into the standards because you have to show multiple methods. There was one kid whose parent went to the teacher and said, my kid's really stressed out, just wants one method. Can he just do the multiple method? The only concern the teacher had was, well, he won't do well on the SAGE test. And when the mother said, well, then I'll opt him out, the teacher said, great, he can just do the standard itself. So, standard algorithm.
And if we have another minute on that, if anyone wanted to speak to a challenge that went along with that, we have Amanda. Did you want to speak to?
If I may, I would love to speak to a logistical challenge that I've observed. So I didn't say this during my intro, but I teach courses for pre-service teachers and in-service teachers. I'm spending a lot of time in schools, and my main job at the university is to work in teacher training. And one concern that I have is simply changing our standards too rapidly to allow for a fair chance for teachers to implement and execute these standards. And I'm also concerned with perhaps a confusion amongst what are standards versus curriculum and testing pressure and just the existence of testing and instructional strategies, right? These are different things. And so I'm concerned that we're not supporting teachers or that we're being impatient, I guess, with the supportive teachers that we provide with all of this change going on and all of these pressures from updating the standards so rapidly. And I just wanted to point out that I think the concerns that we have are not actually concerns with the standards, but these other things. And I'm very hopeful that these are things that we can solve over time.
Board Member Lisa Cummins, did you have a follow-up there?
Yes, Amanda. So in Finland, they review their standards every 10 years, right? And we're coming up on that 10-year mark with the math standards. So would you agree that a review of these standards is an appropriate time right now then? Because they haven't been changed, and the change that took place a year and a half ago was just minimal, maybe wording at best, but it really didn't impact the teaching of the standards. So I would argue relatively that now is the time to have a performance audit or such nature of in-depth analysis of what the standards are doing right and what they're doing wrong and how we can upgrade them. Because as you said at the beginning, you challenged the idea that there's no such thing as a best standard, right? We can always grow and become better. So, and that's what I would suggest and challenge you on.
Yeah, I assume I'm responding. I have two thoughts here. One is that this notion of best standards not existing is partially because our needs as a society, right, as we just evolve together, these change, right? Like if part of public school's purpose for existence is to attend to like employment needs, that's something that changes over time, and we no longer need human computers, for example, right? We actually have reasons to support students in engaging in these collaborative learning environments. Maybe that's more of a priority right now than becoming really quick human computers. And another one is that, as I definitely agree, like 10 years to review the standards is completely appropriate. What I want to be careful with is like confounding our assessment of the standards with other variables such as testing pressure and the existence or non-existence of curriculum, because those are things that can be addressed that are actually separate issues from what the standards actually say.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Board Member Cummins, we have some people are prepared to give us a lot of information. We're not going to solve our standards thing, but But I'll give you another follow-up. But I think we want to hear everything and
Sure.
and not choose one lane, but one more follow-up.
One more follow-up. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your patience with me. So my other comment, and maybe you can address this or anybody on the panel, would you agree that, or would you be willing to accept that not every student could process the procedures or the teachings taught through the math standards as they currently are? I can't remember, your colleague at UW High School, she just left last year, it was her last year. I talked to her about math, and she said, the one thing about the Utah core math is it doesn't teach the why. That it taught it taught the what and the how, but the traditional taught the why. And together, if they taught together, then you could have a fantastic discussion about math. But when you're only teaching the what and the how, and you're not teaching the why, a lot of students have been lost, mine included. And so, is it acceptable then to say, what is lacking here? What can we add more to help those students that are struggling from the new standards? I mean, this is an 8-year implementation, right? We don't know what the remediation scores for the students that have gone through the whole program up into higher ed. We still don't know what their futures look like, because how that implementation, especially through STEM, that was a question brought up by Jason Zimba, who wrote the standards, that the Common Core standards could not get them through all the way to STEM. So we haven't had a huge follow through of the implementation of what we're doing. And so if we can look back and say, here's the why, and include the what and the how, and put them together, maybe we can have a better outcome.
Okay, Patty.
Okay. We have one more question, and the next question is, what are our next steps in the continuous improvement cycle of our mathematics standards? They will never, no matter what, we should always expect more for our students. And our teachers always want more for their students, and our parents do as well, and they deserve the very best. So with that in mind, in the continuous improvement cycle, Wendy, can you speak to that?
I think we need to start listening to parents who have concerns. I've had people say to me, well, these standards are there, why are you still beating this drum? Well, because it didn't work for my kids. They have a math major at home, and my daughter said to me a couple years ago, she says, I don't know how kids get through this if they don't have a math major there. Well, Mr. Minson said that they're going to Mathnasium. That's in part how they're doing it. Teachers are spending a lot of time after school helping kids. Parents are being a lot more involved, so the parental involvement piece is really, really good. But the outcome, when I was knocking doors to run for office, I didn't hear people saying, you know what, we really need to update our health standards. We really need to update our, and it could be, and I do understand the difference between curriculum and I am talking standards here. But parents are not pleased with the outcome by and large. If it's working for their kids, and there's a percentage of kids for whom it works just great, but there is a huge percentage of kids where it's not working. And if it's not working for your kid, all of a sudden, I don't care how great the test scores are, or that we're collaborating and our teachers love it. If it's not working for your kid, it's not working for your kid. And that's where we need to look, because the 100%, when you talk to parents, they don't like the math. That's just how it is. And I'm sorry I'm not like the one downer person here, but that's the reality is they're not saying please update science, and we're looking at science. They are saying we need to do something about the math. It is very, very frustrating. So again, I would look at where has it been successful. When California adopted their 1997 standards and started with Algebra 1 in 8th grade, they closed huge achievement gaps. That was like the single largest achievement gap closure thing, was giving all these kids the opportunity to have Algebra 1 in 8th grade. I was lucky enough to have that as well, although I'm a little older than 1997.
And thank you, Melissa. Can we have? We've only heard from you once. Apologize for that, but if we can, we'll end with you if that works for you on this same question.
Thanks. I'll take that. I appreciate the fact that we're all here for the same purpose. We all want to help our students, and we all want to help them achieve. I think our next steps as far as the continuous improvement cycle, clearly I think we can do a better job of communicating with parents. And when we communicate with parents, I think the liaison between state stakeholders and district stakeholders, the person that really impacts them the most are the teachers. So when we support teachers and we help our teachers really understand the power of the standards and the progression of the standards and how connected they are, when they understand that and are able to see the purpose between why they're written the way they are, then they're able to communicate that with parents. I feel I have a lot of conversations with parents as well. I think I get a lot of the phone calls and conversations that I have with them as well. Usually it takes a good conversation with them and maybe looking at a few examples of saying, this is why we're doing it. It's not that we don't want your students to not understand math. We want your children to understand math. We want them to feel successful, and we want them to hopefully overcome some of the math identities that often parents feel. They have that anxiety and they just want to help their students. And so when we're trying to empower them by giving them not multiple strategies, but accepting a student's way of thinking about a problem. It's not, we want you to do it this way and this way and this way, but we want to be able to accept and honor how a student understands it and show them how it works within the greater math community. So I didn't see that sign. Was it 5 seconds?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Oh, yay. All right. So I didn't mention this as much, but I think one of the biggest challenges that we have as far as continuous improvement is finding funding, resources, and time to help train our teachers. Every time there's a change, then we have to restart the process. We have to restart that and change it up. And now my time's up, so I'll stop with that.
I appreciate the comments on the panel, especially as we can see the representation of people that will truly impact the trajectory of mathematics for a child. Most importantly, we have someone that represents parents and a parent perspective, and then moving to our elementary and high school and onto our higher education. These are the people that are important in the lives of students as we move along that mathematical trajectory. And the passion for mathematics, I think that's one of the things that binds us all together, as every single board member's passion of mathematics does as well. I can just feel the love of mathematics right now. And I know each one of you wanted to further the conversation for an hour, but we will have some discussion now and some questions that we have from the board.
Okay, we'll start off with Board Member Elisa Ellis.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming and taking the time to be here today. I really appreciate it. The reason I ran for the State Board of Education was in large part because of the math standards. And I'm one of those parents that is not happy with it. And it's frustrating when we talk about communication with the parents and so I would just encourage you, when you do reach out to parents, that you don't just talk to them about how they're wrong and how they need to, parents feel their kids. They know when there's something not right, and so it's more than just that they don't understand. That's one of the most demeaning things to a parent, is to feel like everyone's patting you on your head saying, we're sorry your child's having a hard time, you just don't understand this. And we're going to just continue moving forward whether or not you like it, because we know better than you. And so I would encourage you to not do that, because as a parent who's experienced that, it's not a fun place to be. And I would like, but the thing I'd like to focus on is this jump where we're talking about remedial mathematics in college for entering freshmen decreasing. And so the question I would pose to you is, can we accurately say this is as a result of the change to Common Core math? Because we did make changes in math in 2007, and so we keep using some of these data points as measures for why we need to keep and not make any changes or improvements. So I'd like you to address that. Do you feel like there's really an accurate measure there, or can we say that there's other factors at play? And I mean, I'd like to hear a couple different perspectives. So
I have an opinion. So Alpine School District didn't start implementing the standards, the math standards, to the point that the first graduating class that went from the 7th grade, intermediate 1, all the way through was the ones that graduated in May, just this past May. My son graduated a year ago. He started it in 8th grade. So 2017 in Alpine, and we represent about 11% of the entire population of the state of Utah for public ed. And you guys could tell me if I'm wrong, but that's the number we always used in our heads. So those kids who did not have an Algebra 1 course in 8th grade for Alpine School District graduated in 2017. Now, we're in Utah County. We have a huge percentage of kids that go on LES missions. So of those kids that are going into college, we haven't seen them. They're starting to trickle in. And so I don't know that this representation of 33% in 2016, the kids that were graduating in 2016 from Alpine School District had not had any of this math currently.
Yeah, I think that's definitely that's a true statement, because why are we ever working on other things other than standards if we don't hope that they improve what we're doing in our classroom? So yeah, I think you're right that it is hard to pinpoint when there are a lot of things that we are doing to try to support student achievement. So we are spending time on supporting students in instruction and supporting best practices, but I think it's a piece of the puzzle, but it's true. It's hard to pull apart, like, what exactly did the success come from in every situation?
Okay. Board Member Linda Hansen.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. I love math too, Patty. Just saying.
Thank you.
So with the remediation, I heard from Granite School District about a year ago that they were seeing a lot better results with college and remediation for their students. And so they were excited about it about a year ago. And I have to tell you that anecdotally, what I'm hearing matches the data. Because when I first was out campaigning 4 years ago, what I heard from parents was, we hate this math. This is so hard. We don't understand it. It reminded me kind of when I was a kid and they went to my parents, and so I'm old. You guys got to remember, I'm old. My parents would always say, we don't understand this. This is the new math, right? The new math. So, but the parents were really, really concerned about, like kind of what Wendy's talking about. But this time, when I'm out campaigning and I'm asking parents how they feel about the math, they say, my kids are brilliant in math. They understand math. Do you have any problems with the math standards? No, we love the math standards. Our kids are understanding the concepts. And so it was a total turnaround from the first time when I went out this time. So I'm seeing, anecdotally, of course, that matches the data that you guys are seeing, that parents and kids are doing better in math and are understanding it better. So it may be just my part of the world that's that way, but I'm hearing very positive results from the math.
Board Member Cindy Davis.
Thank you. Just two questions. One is, we've had 4 changes in the last 10 years. It says here, is there a way to find a summary of those changes or to get like a percentage of what has been changed over the last 4 years? And then 10 years in the 4 changes. And then another question, and maybe this is more directed to you, Wendy, but just help me understand quickly that the teacher that said secondary math 3 is a prerequisite to concurrent enrollment math 1010, but he feels his students would do better in math 1010 than math secondary 3. Is math 1010 a more difficult, a less difficult level than secondary math 3?
Well, that was his opinion, was that there were some concepts in secondary 3, again, because it's combined and integrated. Some of the concepts would be fine, but because you have some of these more overarching concepts, some of those concepts are going to be more difficult than Math 1010. And so when he was looking at it, he was looking at the kids who are going to be successful and the ones who are going to struggle, and he realized that there's a percentage of those kids, and the number he gave me was 60% of the kids who would struggle with secondary 3 that could be successful in Math 1010. But because Algebra 2 has always been a prerequisite for concurrent enrollment, and secondary 3 is Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. When you get to secondary 3, in theory, you should have had all 3 of those combined. I think that's where the Board of Regents was going with, to come up with that, but that's my understanding. I haven't taught secondary 3, I've just looked through the standards.
Just a quick follow-up, who determines if that's the prerequisite? Is it the university that's saying?
I think it's the Board of Regents,
The Board of
but you
Regents,
guys
okay.
could probably have an influence. All I'm saying.
And Amanda, I don't know if you can follow up with that with 1010 and 1050, and maybe even 1030, the differences of what that would look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So this question is about how do Math 1010 and Secondary 3 relate, right?
Yeah.
Yes, Math 1010 is just a subset of the material in Secondary 3. Right, Secondary 3 has geometry and statistics in it, and also goes beyond the algebra secondary 3 goes beyond the algebra that is in intermediate algebra or math 1010.
So it
Does make sense then.
So in speaking to that, so after secondary 2, 1010 is actually a less rigorous course than secondary 3.
Then why is secondary 3 the prerequisite for 1010?
So
Right.
That was my point.
So right. Most people, yeah. So what it is in I don't know, maybe Amanda, you can speak to this as well, but when it talks about course requirement for graduation in various courses at a university level, many of those courses require 1050 as the course to graduate from. So they're trying to prepare them for that. But it's a great question to pose is if students aren't going that track or that route. So it's a great question to pose as well. And Amanda, I don't know if you want to add to that being our high school or maybe, you know.
Well, I think specific, if I can jump
Yeah,
in,
go
10:30,
right ahead.
he was saying it's 10:10 and 10:30 is usually the concurrent enrollment path, is my understanding. But 10:30 at UVU anyway, a large percentage of the degrees that they offer only require 10:30, not 10:50. 10:50, I think you would absolutely want secondary 3. But for 10:30, he was saying that doing a 10:10, 10:30 option might give more kids the accessibility. So I don't know.
Mike, do you
I'm
have?
just throwing it out.
Those are good questions. I don't
They are
have
good
a good
questions.
answer to those.
Yeah.
That's
Board members, I got to dive into this. We've got USDB that starts at 4:15, but this is all good discussion. And I just want to go back to the beginning of this when this was put on the agenda and we talked to Wendy and some others. This is kind of like a door opener discussion. We're not going to solve all of our issues. It's to just help us with our awareness at a little, just to start it. And there's going to be a lot of dialogue as this moves forward. And but out of respect for others that are here, we're going to probably end this here pretty quick. So there's a couple, let's see, I'm going to just recognize who hasn't had a chance to speak. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
So in some of the concerns that were brought up, much of it was a matter of fluency or time to practice, as the example was given. Do you find that that's inherent in the standards themselves, like there's roadblocks to that opportunity for practice and fluency, or is it just there's not enough time to spend on that fluency or that practice?
I would argue that it is part of the standards because the standards do include, as I showed the one example, that they include all of these other methodologies. And so in order to pass the tests, because the tests include the methodologies, then the teachers feel obligated to focus on 5 different ways of solving the problem as opposed to the one that works every time and is consistent. I'm not saying don't allow teachers to use those other methods if they work, but if you have a kid where they've got this one method down pat, it's a waste of time, honestly, for them to spend on the others, and it can confuse them. So yeah, I do think that the standards themselves, having all of those options in there is a problem. The example that I gave is that you add and subtract fluently within 20. If that were just the standard alone, without the by place value or using a number line or whatever else, that up there would be a fine standard, and everybody, it doesn't matter what the methodology is, you could access that however it works for your kid. But when we say, you have to use the place value, then if that's on the test, then the teachers know it, then they're going to spend the time on the place value because they're going to be measured by whether or not the kid can pass the test. So I would say, yeah, it does go directly to the standard.
Can I add to that just a little bit? I think there's definitely a fluency standard where it has a fluency standard, and then there's also a standard where it says, and I'll use the addition and subtraction, using place value strategies and properties of operations. And so when you're looking at that standard, it just adds some depth to it, because I can certainly memorize 9 plus 4 and be good to go. But when I look at 9 plus 4 and use it with a strategy, if I understand that I can make 10 from 9 plus 4 and take a number from my 4 and switch that over to make 10, now I don't have to add on my fingers to get to
13, I can just understand I've just moved one over there and I have 10 and the extra ones to get to 13. And so it's just expanding their flexibility. It's fluency can be defined by accuracy, efficiency, and flexibility, and knowing when to use a memorized fact, knowing when to use a calculator, knowing when an estimate is okay, and knowing when I need a little bit deeper understanding so that I can understand those properties that really open the world of mathematics so much more than just that basic level of fluency. So I would argue that there's two levels of fluency requirements in the standards. A fluency component, but then also the deeper pieces that you want to get at, the commutative property and the associative property and the distributive property that open the world of mathematics in all different realms. So,
Okay. Board Member Jenny Earl.
Thank you. I love math too, so we're buddies here. I'll be quick, respectful of time. Just a couple things. Are all high schools doing integrated math?
Yes.
Okay. I hope we can carry on further dialogue because I think there's some valuable information out there, and I know of quite a bit of concerns with the integrated math, but I hope we can carry on that dialogue further down the road and not make this just a one-time, one-and-done deal. I'm interested in the research about changing all standards. If I understood you right, if you could get me that research, I'd be interested in it because that is, if that's true, that's very relevant to the things we do here. And that is what we did when we changed these standards. We changed all the standards. So it would be interesting to have that research. Child development actually doesn't change, even though other things do. So we always want to be aware of what is appropriate, right, for child development, and what is appropriate for those different age groups, not necessarily what's appropriate for high school wouldn't be appropriate for lower grades. Would you agree? Okay. And then what was my last question? I had one more, or comment, I guess. It wasn't necessarily a question. I think I'll end there because I can't find it. So thank you.
Okay. Deputy Superintendent, do you want to finish up with?
Just as a follow-up, I'm hearing that there's a few items that we can bring back, and it just as a spoiler alert, which is Standards Committee, which is my favorite committee to attend, not just because I have to, but because I really love it there. We're going to be discussing some of these things as to, bringing up some of the audits on standards, and, what really is a trigger that has us review a standard and some of that standards process. So some of those things are going to be brought back in a different way through Standards Committee, just in this agenda later on tonight.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, panel and guests that's participated in this discussion. Again, it's like you might measure your contribution based on how many minutes you had to talk or what the content was, but the whole intent was to address a concern, and board members brought it forward, and this is an informational part of our meeting here, and standards and assessments, a lot of action happens there, and I'm sure the discussion that has been started here isn't going to get put to bed. So thank you for being here and for your participation, and board members, I appreciate your patience. I know you have a lot of questions, but we've got to get to our next meeting. So thank you. Board members, as they're setting up and USDB's setting up, we'll take a quick 3 to 4 minute break. Please hurry back in here so we can get